Hello and welcome to Drunk on Tea. Today I'm going to show you how to quickly and easily paint a warrior of Numenor. Ideal for your games of Middle-earth strategy battle game. The Numenorean Warriors are fantastic if you want to play the Battle of the Last Alliance, or if you just want an army that plays a little bit differently than a lot of the other Middle-earth armies. So the first thing I've done is I've primed the model with Chaos Black spray. This will give us a nice smooth, even base coat for the rest of our colours to work from, as well as giving us that black base that will be used for a lot of our techniques. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm coming in with Corvus Black, and I'm going to dry brush this all over the model. Because a lot of the uniform for these Numenoreans is black, by using the Chaos Black spray as the base coat, we can dry brush the highlights onto the fabric and quickly and easily create an interesting look all over our models without having to worry about painting all of the small details by hand after we've painted everything else. So you don't need to be neat at this stage at all, just dry brush the Corvus Black all over the model. This will give us our first stage of highlight to all of the fabric. And after that Corvus Black dry brush has been applied, you can see how it's caught the flatter and most raised surfaces, brightening up those areas of fabric and creating a nice transition from the darker pure Chaos Black in all the recesses. So now I'm dry brushing again with some Eshin Grey, being a lot lighter this time, focusing this just onto the most raised details and most prominent folds of the fabric. But once again, I'm working my way all around the model, applying this dry brush to all of the fabric so I get that nice transition from the Chaos Black spray through the Corvus Black to the Eshin Grey highlight. So just very lightly flick your brush back and forth all over the fabric, putting a little bit of Eshin Grey onto the sharpest and most raised details, and this will give us a really nice highlight to our Numenorean Warrior. With that Eshin Grey applied, you can see how it's picked out all of those details to the cape and his uniform. So now it's time to paint in all of the metallic details on the warrior. For this, I'll be using Lead Belcher. I'm going to pick out all the details like his sword, being careful around any other areas so we don't get this accidentally over any of the black that we've already painted and highlighted. All over his helmet, we will be painting some of these details gold later, but for now I'm just picking out all of the helmet with some Lead Belcher. Also picking out any of these armor pieces here, so he's got some on his arms and on his legs. Just carefully applying a couple of layers of Lead Belcher to all of these details. Obviously, if you do make any mistakes at this stage, you can tidy back up by painting the areas black and then a very light, careful dry brush over the areas, but try and work as nice and neatly as possible. I'm also picking out all of the chainmail here, making sure I sink this into the recesses. And finally, I'm picking out the detailing on the shield as well. So I'm going to pick out the symbol here on the front of the shield. I'm also going to pick out the metallic areas at the top and bottom of the shield as well. Just going to carefully apply some Lead Belcher to all of these areas. Once that Lead Belcher has been applied, we've picked out all of the silver details on the model. There's actually only a couple of more base coats left to apply. So the first of these will be some Rawk flesh. I'm going to pick out the little bits of fabric for his undercoat. So it's these bits here coming out underneath his main robe. Just going to carefully apply a couple of layers of Rawk flesh. Goes all the way along the bottom. It'll be nice and neat around all the other colours we've already painted. Also got a little bit exposed on his arms. I'm leaving any of the straps holding the armour plates on black. I'm just making sure I pick out the exposed bit of fabric with some Rawk flesh and this bit here going around his neck. So adds a nice little pop of colour to the model, brightens it up from just being black. That's interest to you Numenoreans. With that Rawk flesh applied, you can see how it's added that little pop of colour. So the next thing I'm going to paint is a little bit of exposed skin on his face. For this I'll be using Bugman's Glow. I'm just going to very carefully apply this all over the skin to his face. So it's only this little bit here showing out from the middle of the helmet. So I'm just going to catch this with a couple of layers of Bugman's Glow. With the face picked out, it's really added some personality to the model. So now I'm going to pick out his hair and a couple of leather details on his gloves. So I'll be using Rhinox hide for this. I'm going to carefully pick out all of the hair flowing from the back of his helmet. Being careful around the black cape, just making sure I pick out all of the hair with some Rhinox hide. And I'm also going to pick out his gloves as well. So this will give the impression of leather gloves. So just going to carefully pick out these with a layer of Rhinox hide. With the hair and gloves picked out, there's only one final base coat left to apply to this Numenorean, and that's going to be to pick out all of the gold details. So for the gold, I'll be using Retributor armor. I'm going to pick out some of the detailing here on his helmet. I'm going to do these raised parts here and the guards coming down the side of his face, as well as the band going across the front. I'm also going to pick out any of the detailing on his belt and trinkets, things like that, making sure I catch these with a layer of Retributor armor. And finally, the stars on the shield. Just going to carefully pick these out with a small spot of Retributor armor. With the Retributor armor applied, that is all of the base coats applied to the model. So the next step is going to be to shade the miniature. First shade I'm applying is Reichland Flesh Shade, which I'm just going to apply carefully over the exposed skin of his face. With some known oil, I'm going to shade all of the areas we painted with Lead Belcher. So that's going to be the detailing on the shield, his sword, the top of his helmet, the chainmail, the armor, all of these details I'm picking out. Don't forget to catch the gloves and the hair at this stage as well. And finally, with some Agrax Earthshade, I'm going to pick out the parts we painted with Rawk flesh, as well as anything we painted gold. So all of his underfabric and all of the gold details I'm just catching with a shade of Agrax Earthshade. If you enjoyed the video, please press like. If you want more videos, press the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. If you would like to support the channel and become a member, please press the join button down below. After those shades have dried, you can see they've added some definition to all of the base coats. So now it's time to start highlighting. I'm going to start off by highlighting the skin. For this, I'll be coming in with Bugman's Glow first. And I'm just going to carefully apply this to areas of the face that the shade didn't settle. So wherever the right flesh shades settled in a recess, I'm leaving that and coming in on either side of it and brightening all of these areas back up to their pure Bugman's Glow colour with a couple of thin layers. When that skin's brightened up, you can see it's really highlighted the definition of the face. So now I'm coming in with some Cadian flesh tone. I'm just going to apply a few small spot highlights on some of the sharpest details. So things like the tip of his nose, the bottom lip, his chin, areas like that. I'm just applying small highlights of Cadian flesh tone just to highlight the face. And with a couple of spots of Cadian flesh tone, that is all of the skin on the model highlighted. It's just a small area, so it doesn't take long, but it is the focal point. So now I'm going to paint the eyes. For this, we'll be coming in with Abaddon Black first. I'm going to very carefully sink this into the recesses of the eye sockets. Just catching these with a small spot of Abaddon Black. We're dealing with really small areas here on these Middle-earth miniatures. To be nice and careful. With some white scar, I'm simply applying a small spot in the middle of the black we just applied. Normally I would paint black back into the eyes again, but this is so small that just a small spot of white is all we need to give the impression of eyes. And with the eyes picked out, that is all of the face highlighted, which really acts as a focal point to the model. So next thing I'm going to highlight is the detailing on his fabric. For this I'll be using Skaven Blight Dinge. I'm just going to very carefully apply an edge highlight to the symbol in the middle of his chest. So where this is raised, we've been caught with our dry brushes earlier. Just to accentuate that, I'm applying a little bit of Skaven Blight Dinge on the edges. With that highlighted, that is all of the main fabric on the model painted, but next I'm going to highlight the little bits of under fabric. For this I'll be using Rawk flesh first. And much like with the skin, I'm applying this wherever the shade didn't settle. So wherever there's Agrax shade in a recess, I'm leaving that as a darker shadow area and coming in on either side with a little bit of pure Rawk flesh just to bring these areas back up to their brighter colour. And now with some Deepkin flesh, I'm going to apply this as an edge highlight to all of those areas we just brightened back up with Rawk flesh. So on all the sharpest points, tops of raised folds, details like that, I'm just applying a small edge highlight of Deepkin flesh just to brighten these areas up. And with that Deepkin flesh applied, you can see how it's really brightened up all of those areas of under fabric. So the next thing I'm going to highlight is his hair. For this I'll be using Mournfang Brown, and I'm just going to very carefully dry brush this all over the hair. So I'm using a small brush, making sure I don't accidentally catch this over any of the fabric. Just carefully dry brushing some Mournfang Brown lightly over the hair to pick out all of those sculpted in strands and bring out all of the detail to his hair. With the hair highlighted, the model's really coming together now. Next thing I'm going to highlight is the leather of his gloves. For this I'll be using Scrag Brown. And I'm just going to carefully apply some small spot highlights on any raised details to his gloves. So the tips of all the fingers, knuckles, details like that, just catching these with a really small spot highlight of Scrag Brown. This will give the impression of worn leather on the gloves. And with the gloves highlighted, there's now only a couple of things left to highlight on the model. The next one of these will be the edge of the shield, which I'm going to highlight with a little bit of Mechanica Standard Grey. And I'm just simply catching the very edge of the shield with a thin edge highlight of Mechanica Standard Grey, just to make the edge stand out. And with the shield highlighted, there's only a couple of things left to highlight now. The next one of those will be all of the silver details. So I'm going to catch these with some Stormhose Silver. And I'm just applying this as an edge highlight to any sharp points on details like the armor and the sword. So with a really small brush, I'm just applying tiny edge highlights to all of the most raised and prominent details. See, I'm just catching some of the parts of chainmail. And this is an edge highlight around all of the detailing on the shield. This will give the impression of light catching the edge of these metallic details. Just going to make sure I edge highlight the shield for catching the guard and the sharp points of the blade with a little bit of Stormhose Silver. And with the Stormhose Silver applied, there is just one final highlight left to apply, and that will be to highlight all of the gold details on the model. For this, I'll be using Liberator Gold. I'm just going to make sure I carefully apply this as a small spot on the sharpest points of any of the gold details. I'm just applying this as a thin edge highlight to any of the areas of gold. Just give the impression of light shining off of these surfaces. And with the Liberator Gold applied, that is how to quickly and easily paint up a Numenorean Warrior for your games of Middle-earth strategy battle game. Using this guide, you can quickly paint up a whole army of these guys ready for the tabletop. So please let me know in the comments down below, are there any other Middle-earth miniatures you would like to see me paint? But thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. And as always, an extra special thank you to Jenkins, our Tea Lover channel member. Thank you so much for the support, and happy painting!